Hello and welcome to this month's edition of the Coaches Corner, where we highlight some of the best coaches in our area and the things they do to help their kids be the best they can be. Today, let's introduce to you Coach Adam Huse, the head football coach here at Putnam County. He's been here for 4 years now. This is his fourth season, 3 winning seasons, and this year he led the Midgets to their first district title since 2006. Now, we got into all the excellence, Coach. Let's get into it. How'd you kind of get into football, and what was your journey to get you here to Putnam County?
I always grew up playing it, enjoyed that. Knew that I really wasn't good enough to keep playing it for a very long time. So decided I wanted to get into the coaching aspect of it, and then played at Knox County for Coach Dabney there, and then he kind of helped me get some connections down in the Springfield area where I was going to college at Missouri State. Then I spent, 4 years, something like that, at Pleasant View Middle School, coaching 7th grade football. Was an assistant there, and then ended up from there going to Hillcrest High School for a year, to Milan High School for a year, back to Hillcrest in Springfield for 9 years, and then got my first head coaching opportunity at Marshall in 2017. Spent 5 years there, and now back up here in the Northeast Missouri, back here for the last 4.
And let's start with that. Coach Dabney, you talked about it. He's currently at Truman State University. What did you learn just from your playing days there with Coach Dabney?
A lot of what we do offensively is based on stuff that we used to do when I was in high school. But I learned more I always joke between him. I consider him and a guy named John Beckham, from when I was at Hillcrest, my mentors and guys that I feel like I'm confident I can call and I can talk to. And I learned as much to do and not to do from both of those guys, seeing how they did things and how they do things. But I worked on John's passion and his love of kids and love of football, and how hard much time and effort he was going to put into not just the X's and O's of the football aspect of it, but also into the kids and into the off season and into, being that multi-sport pusher, pushing kids into playing the multiple sports. And he did that when I was in high school, did it when I coached with him, and so just had a lasting impact on what I think is the proper way to go about coaching young men.
And what about football made you want to keep doing it, especially going into the coaching world like you did?
I just love the game. And when you love the game, I think you have to, I did a year away from it, when I was freshman year of college, and I hated it. I tore my ACL my senior year of high school. And back then it wasn't a complete tear. And so my parents' insurance wouldn't pay to get it completely fixed. We couldn't pay to get it fixed. And obviously it's one of those that kind of heals on its own over time. And so that kind of put an end to the playing days. And then probably wasn't good enough really to play either, but I'd like to think I was, but I probably wasn't. Decided I really wanted to still be around the game. I loved it and missed it. And at the time I was going to be a history teacher. I love history. And I was like, I can put those two things together, and do a career that I actually enjoy going to do every day.
And you talked about how Coach Dabney kind of helped you get into the coaching. What was that like starting out in middle school like you did, and what did you learn during your first couple years coaching? The biggest thing that coaching middle school teaches you is patience. You learn patience because the kids don't know anything, and when Springfield, they have 9 middle schools, and so you play at that time they played just the city schools, and so you played all 8 of them. So you played 8 games. There was no tournament, no nothing like that, and most of these kids you don't get them until that first week of camp, and then so you learn how to deal with patience, but deal with kids who don't know anything but are willing to try. They play really hard, and there's a lot of pride within those individual little schools. And so it taught me a lot of, not so much the X's and O's of football, but it taught me a lot of how to deal with kids and how to build relationship with kids, and how that building of a relationship will benefit on the end and the long run of stuff. And then you went from there. You said you had several jobs to get your first scoring. What was that like when you first started being a head coach? What was that transition like, going from being the assistant to being the head coach of a high school program like you did?
The biggest transition is, and I remember sitting in, John Beckham was my head coach at Hillcrest when I was the defensive coordinator there, sitting in his office, and he said, all right, be ready to be done coaching football. Now it's all about he goes, you're going to coach a lot less football than you ever did before. And I laughed about it, but he's true. When you got into that first coaching job, I was amazed at all the business side of it that you have to do, the dotting of the I's and crossing of the T's and all that little thing. And you get to the point where, like, can we just coach football, And then coming to a smaller school has allowed me to coach a lot more football than what I did at a bigger school. When I was at Marshall, we were a Class 4 school, and so you're number-wise, we were in the 50s and 60s as far as kids out for football. There's three different levels of programs plus the junior high. So there's a lot more of that off-field stuff that you have to do, but it also gives you an opportunity to build those relationships at a lot bigger of a level as well. And so that was the biggest transition, was just learning to going from coaching football to also being that manager of a program more than just being a football coach.
And what was that like coming in your first job like that at such a big school like that? What was that kind of intimidating going into that?
It was not, just because I came from Springfield Hillcrest, which was, we had, I think 12 or 1,300 students in our school. We were a Class 4 program, and I was going to a Class 4 program. But I was going from where I coached our defense, which we had 30 to 40 guys on just our defense, to a program that only had 25 kids out for football total. So the numbers were about the same. And so we worked really hard to build those numbers up, and I'm very proud that we did. I think when I left, they had 62 kids on their roster, somewhere around that, right? So we did a really good job of building the numbers up. And playing football is playing football. The difference in playing Springfield, playing Glendale or Willard or, Kickapoo, some of those schools, going up to Marshall where we played Hannibal and Moberly and Mexico and Kirksville, that was different. But at the same time, it was, coaching football is coaching football, and it's just still about building those relationships with kids.
And kind of not really coming home, but you're in the same area, same conference at one point at Knox County, coming to Putnam County. How'd you end up here at Putnam County?
Oh, I was joking about it. Actually, my wife I'll give her the credit for me being here. We knew that we were leaving Marshall, that wasn't going to continue. And so as much as I probably looked at Mo teaching jobs, she did too, looking for jobs, and she saw it up there. And I just knew where it was at. I was like, I don't think I really want to go back up there, all the way up there, and she's like, fine, if you don't apply, I'm applying for you. And so I think it was the last or the next to last day that the job was open that I actually applied for the position. And, I hate to actually say that she was 100% right. It was definitely the right thing. It was the best thing that happened to our family and to myself and my kids and everybody to come up here and to, I knew about Putnam County. You knew about, everybody talks about, the midgets. And I was like, yeah, I knew it. It's one of those things where it's not a shock to me because we played here. My senior year, we played here at football. We were able to actually be victorious here. Played basketball here. I ran track here, came for the Marcus Townsend track meet many times. So it was very familiar, and it's also much closer to my home. My parents are only, an hour and a half away. And so my dad gets to come over, and he was able to watch his grandson play, and my daughter, who's a senior now, watch her do her cheer stuff. And so it's been great to allow them to be a lot more active in our kids' lives.
And kind of talking a little bit, the old Tri-Rivers rivalry right there, back in those conference days. What was it like for you coming here to play at Putnam County back then?
I don't really remember. I remember a few things. I always joke with them that we've improved the locker room situation, because if you ever came to Putnam County, the visitor locker room was something to be special, and that's where the concession stand is now. They've built that other locker room over there for the visitors. And so, and I remember that the track meet was huge. There was tons of teams that would always come to it. It was always one of our bigger ones that we came to. So I don't really remember. I don't think there was really a huge rivalry at all, just because of the distance of how far Knox and Putnam are away from each other. And I don't think at that point in time either one of us were really all that great in football. So I think that kind of probably played a big part in it as well.
And what was your goal for that first year? Your first year, you had a lot of success. I think, if I remember correctly, you guys had 9 wins that year.
Yep.
What was your goal coming into that season?
I was very pleasantly surprised, because watching a film that we had a young man, Chase Tomlin, that I didn't even know existed, and so I'm planning what we're going to do offensively, and all the assistant coaches were like, well, what about Tomlin? I'm like, I don't know who this kid is. So I had to go back because he had missed his entire junior year due to a health issue, and so I had to go back. So that was a pleasant surprise, and everybody told me that we were going to be talented, and I was able to figure out really quickly when we went to our team camp and we went to stuff just how talented we were, and that allowed us to be very successful. And then, as we went on, I knew our kids were very competitive, and those guys wanted to go at 6 a.m. in the summer. So that's been the standard that we set since then. We go at 6 a.m. And we had 27 or 28 guys that had 100% attendance and didn't miss a single day in the summer. And that's when I knew that we had a chance to be something special. We were very fortunate. We lost to Trenton and then Gallatin twice that year, and ended up in second place in districts. But it was a very special year, and I felt like that we could have a winning season. I wasn't quite sure how special it could be, but it was definitely really nice to be able to pull that off for those kids, and to allow all their hard work to be paid off.
I don't think I've ever heard of teenagers wanting to be up at 6 a.m. I know I don't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine teen people.
You know, I let them pick, basically. You know, I give them a choice. It's either 6, 6:30, or 7. That's where we're going to go. So we're going to go in the mornings. And 3 of the 4 years and summers that I've been here, it's been 6 a.m. We had one group that, hey, can we go? They were like, can we go at 8? Can we go at 8? And that's when I said, I'll give you 6:30. And we'll give you the extra half hour. But then every group after that is like, no, we want to go back to 7. Because they feel like that it builds that mental toughness, because not many people want to get up in the middle of July, in the middle of June, when everybody else is sleeping in, and, you know, we've got a beautiful lake right here, you know, that they can go hang out at and do, but they're showing up, and they're getting here, they're getting their work in, and then we do football stuff afterwards to use our 20 days that we have up, and they do a great job of showing up to everything. I think our overall attendance for the summer for our team is like in the 90%. That's how these kids show up, which is a great thing.
And what does that say about the Putnam County community, that you have kids that are willing to embrace the grind like that?
Well, it says 2 things. First, it says that these parents have instilled a work ethic into their kids, and these kids know that it takes hard work to win and be successful. You know, it didn't just happen this year that we're suddenly really good. These kids they were freshmen 4 years ago, so they saw what those seniors were willing to do and willing to invest, and then they realized that, hey, we're going to do that. We got to keep doing that and keep building on that. And so that keeps building up. But that's not there if the parents aren't saying, yes, you have to go to, you know, if the kid wants to sleep in, the parent says, oh, yeah, you can sleep in, it's no big deal. Then that builds up, and that takes away from that standard and that foundation that we have. But the parents push in. And then the second part is our businesses accept it. And they're willing to work around our kids' schedules. And instead of scheduling, and we're a farming community, so all these farmers, they want to get out and go as soon as it's daylight out. But they know that these kids, that it's important, and they're going to do this. And so they work with these kids. And, you know, we have some when we know it's going to rain and it's going to storm and they've got a bunch of hay on the ground. Yeah, hey, go take care of the hay. We know that. We're a farming community. We're going to do that. But these kids, they're going to show up, and the employers are going to say, you know, hey, we're going to do that. Actually, I got a text just the other day, like last week, from the guy who does the scheduling at High V, because we have a ton of kids that work at High V. Hey, what's going to be your practice schedule over Thanksgiving, so that they can get prepared for it, and so he can make sure not to schedule guys during, you know, when we're going to practice. And that's all the businesses around here work great with the scheduling, because there's not a ton of jobs available, and so they make sure to do that so these kids can come to workouts.
Man, that hay baling can be a workout by itself right there.
It definitely is, and we've got a lot that still do the old little square bales, you know. As when I was a kid, it was huge, and then it kind of everything went to big round bales, but we still have a lot around this community that do the small square bales, and our kids, we've got a lot that do put in a lot of work and get it done.
Now, work clearly paid off. We'll talk about this year later, but then the next year, you had a little bit of adversity there with some injuries and stuff for a lot of those kids you talked about playing this year and the roles. What was it like as a coach helping through a difficult season like that?
You know, that second year was a challenge. We lost, I want to say we lost a kid to injury every game except for 3 that season. And when I say lost to injury, it means not just that game, but they at least missed at least the next game. We were led on defense that year by a young man named Tristan Hindy, who he actually got hurt during track season out here, got hit by a shot put, you know, and so he still dealt with issues with that during the season. Then we had Jude Watt, who was a safety for us, an returning all-conference kid who had a dislocated shoulder, and you know he missed multiple games. And my son, Colin Huse, was our starting linebacker and tight end, and he rolled an ankle really bad that bothered him the entire year and made him miss a couple games. And then it was just like we lost, actually senior now, Trevin Reeder was going to be a two-way starter for us as a sophomore, and he had a severe hamstring pull on the 3rd or 4th play of the game. We lost our starting center on the 2nd play of the game. We lost the starting running back and returner on the opening kickoff of that season, and it just kept building up, and it paid off for this year because all of these kids had to play as sophomores when a lot of them probably weren't ready to play. You know, and they built in and they kept continuing to fight and dig and claw, and you know, and the best part about that group is we were winless until week 8. And they still showed up to practice every day and worked really, really hard. And then we were able to get wins the last 2 weeks of the year, and then went back to West Strand and almost pulled that one out in the district semifinals, I think. Had a really good opportunity there, just couldn't quite make it happen. But we were really close, and we were close in a lot of those games, but it built adversity. And then the current group, it helped teach those guys that we've got to dig in and we got to fight, and you know it's not always going to be easy.
About building it up right there, baling the hay, so to say, right there.
Yeah.
Getting up there, winning year last year, and then this year. When did you realize, before we spoil it, when did you realize this year was going to be different than the years past?
The biggest, when we knew for a fact that it was going to be, we thought we had a chance to be good. But when we really knew we had a chance to be really good was we go to Higginsville team camp down the first week of June, either like the very end of May, 1st of June. So as soon as school gets out, you get a week and a half of camp here, and then we go down there. And we went down there, and with our varsity defense against bigger schools, everybody we played was, the only team that was our size was Harrisburg, I guess, and South Shelby. We still played Harrisburg and South Shelby down there. They were our size, but they're much bigger schools. And our varsity defense, our starting defense, didn't give up 25 yards, maybe 30 yards total. And they didn't play a ton because we knew we needed to see people and rotate. And offensively, we were able to have success on everybody. And it's like, well, is it just because it's early? Or is it, then you started watching film when you got home and you're like, no, we're really pretty good. And then as we kept building in summer and you just kept seeing it get better and better and better. And I think when I really took off for me is it was in practice when our scout team would do something funky and just kind of had fun, do something, and it would mess our O-line up, our offensive line would stop, and they wouldn't have to ask me, hey, what did we do wrong? They would talk with each other and go, hey, if he does this, you have to do that, and I'll do this. And they were able to make those adjustments without ever having to come to me. And that's the mark of a really good football team when they can figure that stuff out on their own.
I think really good football team is an understatement for this year. You guys went out 9-0, conference champions the regular season. Let's start with the end of the regular season. What was it like week to week with that, building up to that moment where you guys clinched the conference championship?
We were picked to go third in the conference by the preseason coaches, and which is very respectable and very understandable. But our kids kind of took it as because everybody was talking about South Harrison, great team, great seniors, and talking about how great they were because they returned so many starters, and then we were in the exact same boat and they kind of weren't getting talked about. And I think they took that as a little bit of a challenge. And so we knew week 2, right out the gate, we were going to have to play a really tough team, Marceline, week 1. And then week 2, we knew that was a conference championship game in our mind right away. And then you turn around and have to go week 5 and bring undefeated state-ranked Brookfield into here. And we knew we were going to have to play them basically for another state or another conference championship right away. And so we were able to do that. And luckily, these kids love to practice. They love to watch film. They love that grind. And so every day coming to practice, they stay. Our motto for the year, is focus and finish. And so they've done a really good job of focusing on the little stuff and then finishing out every drill, finishing out every practice, and we're working on finishing out the season.
Finishing out the season, guys did good. Beat Highland, got to the championship game, first time since 2019. Well, actually, you did 22. Sorry that you guys, you did 2019, 22 that now. And then you guys won the championship, first time since 2006.
It is, and it's the first time since 1994 that they've won we won the conference and district in the same year.
What's it like to be the coach to do that, to have both of those in the same season like that?
It's great, but it's not about me. It's about the kids. It's I'm just happy for them. It's not about. I'm just the guy fortunate enough to stand on the sideline and wear the stuff and really have the headset on to make some calls. But our kids are the ones that deserve it. They're the ones that have worked really hard and they've set that tone. Like I said, I go back to 4 years ago, my very first year. We love to say the standard is the standard. And these kids are the ones that set that standard 4 years ago. And every senior group after them has continued to hold that standard and continued to raise that standard up. And this group has done the same thing, just kept bringing it up to a higher and higher level.
I think I texted this last night, Coach. I really feel like you sell yourself short. You kind of set that standard coming in. Did you, when you first started this job, did you even think about that you would set the standard like you did for it to come like this?
I had, when anybody goes on interviews for a job, they've got their binder and they've got all their stuff. And I'll never forget sitting in the interview, Dr. Halley asked me, he goes, how much of this stuff is real? How much of this stuff is just BS? And I laughed and I said, well, probably 50-50 because it's all great ideas, but you don't really know what you can implement and what you can't. And I had standards, pillars of excellence in it that I call. They're not anywhere near the same that we have here. Because once you get to know your team and you get to know your coaches, you realize, this is great, but this is even better, and this fits us better. And so we've molded and shaped that sort of stuff into it. But I'm very fortunate and very blessed to be where I am and doing what I'm doing, but it's because I've got the great assistant coaches that have helped dictate where we are, and the great players who show up every single day. And I've got the great, you talked about the great community, and my wife and kids behind me, they allow me to spend all the time that I need to do to get everything ready.
And just 2 more questions for you just saw this. We got to talk to Salisbury again coming up. It's going to be in Salisbury. What's going to be the key for you guys going into that game?
They're Coach Bowman down there has them playing really, really well. I think it's funny. They're very mirror image of us. Their offense is different. They're a little bit more. They get more spread stuff than we do. But they're a 3-4. We're a 3-3. They want to run the football with the amazing running backs. We want to run the ball with amazing running backs. If you look at them in the numbers wise, they've scored more points than we have. But I think we've held teams to less points than they have. But it's very, very close. And as I said, it's very funny. You look at it, it's very mirror images of each other. And so we know that we're in for a really, really good football game. And, luckily South Shelby was able to I know the score doesn't look like it, but they were able to challenge us a little bit, especially in the first half, to get out of our comfort zone a little bit and do a few things differently. Very fortunate that was able to happen, because we don't feel like we've really been challenged that way since Brookfield before, and then maybe even South Harrison before that. And so it was really good to get there, but we know we're in for a really tough game. I'm hoping the rain holds off and doesn't come like they're saying, so it's a dry field, and because I don't want a sloppy, muddy mess down there for either one of us, because we both want to run the football and we both got speed that we want to use.
It's like every time I go to Putnam County playoff game, there's some rain. I remember like that in 2022.
Yeah, that Milan game was really rainy, really cold. There was a lot of people that delayed their games and played it the next day, but we were able to fight through, and I was sick on that day, so that was a miserable day for me, but it was a great outcome, so it was all good in the end.
Shows the mental toughness right there, for the Putnam County. I think that's the great way to end overall talking about Putnam County here. I just want to wrap it up by one thing. We got a lot of new coaches coming in. You see a lot of coaches. What would you tell any coach coming even out of college that you wish you would know when you first started back in that 7th grade team you helped coach?
One of the things that my first year we went 0-10 when I was at Marshall, and actually Coach Dabney is the one that told me. He said the process that you're building is not for the present, it's for the future. And so I actually told another coach this earlier in the year, the same thing. From Coach Dabney. He told me that many years ago, but you're investing in those kids, and you're doing it, but you're also building for that future. And so, you've talked a lot about our standards and the culture that we have here. It didn't happen overnight. And, I was very, very fortunate that the kids that I had here bought into that culture. I wasn't quite as fortunate when I was at Marshall. We had a lot more pushback, and we weren't able to kind of build that same culture. We still had a really good culture, I believe, because we grew the numbers up to a lot of kids wanted to be part of our program, but we still didn't get to that same level, just because we didn't have the same commitment that we had from the community and the kids and the coaches and everything combined. And so that's my thing, is find some people that you can trust, find people that'll build with you, and stick to what you're knowing, but at the same point in time, listen to those around you and adjust those standards to fit your program that you're trying to build and the kids that you have and the community that you have.
It's 2 months on the road. I've heard about Coach Downer. Definitely got to get him on here soon. He's quite a character, ain't he?
He is. If you're going to have to block off a lot more than half an hour if you're going to get him behind a mic and talk, because he will. I always joke whenever I was getting started, he would call and I'd be like, okay, I'm not doing anything else for the next 2 hours, because he's going to talk. But there's a lot of wisdom that comes out of what he says. Like I said, him and my other mentor, John Beckham, was the head coach at Hillcrest when I was down there, and those two guys taught me so much about football. Coach Beckham especially taught me the building of relationships and mentoring kids. He was a foster parent and raising foster kids, and taught me that just there's so much to invest in kids' lives beyond football. And Coach Dabney taught me that investing in these kids' lives within the sport that they're doing and being supportive of them in their other sports and all the things that they do is all going to be effective in the end. And I'm going to finish on, we lost Coach Ben Blank was one of my coaches when I was at Knox County. He was an assistant coach. He just passed away recently, and I still remember stories about him, and he was he was a huge Big Red fan, and so that was the soda. I don't think anybody else loves that soda, but he loved it so much, and that was his reward. I think he almost gave it to us so he could have it himself, but just building that relationship that many, many years later now, you're still impacted by him and his loss and the loss that he had of his community, and so I hope that some point in time, that not anytime soon, but that our kids and everywhere that I've been, feels that I've invested into those kids the way that those three guys did into me.
Said that
it is, and like I said, we spend a lot of time with these young men and women, and if you coach female sports, and I do junior high track, and I was talking to some kids today, they told me they couldn't wait for junior high track, and well, that's a long time away. But yeah, we spend a lot of times, sometimes more than their parents do, and so it's our job to be good role models for them and show them the proper way and the right way to do things.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time here today. It's always great talking with you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for coming. Hopefully, we're able to. I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and there's some great coaches out there. I look forward to watching them.
Yeah, there's a lot of good coaches like to talk about. We're always going to be doing this once a month, like we said, talking to the best coaches area and some of the inspiration. I really feel like what you said right there is great for the young coaches talking about the relationships.
Well, thank you.
And we'll be seeing you guys again third Thursday next month. We'll be seeing you guys then. Hopefully, if you're not coach like Coach Huse.